We didn't order for you, my dad said, sliding a breadbasket toward me, while my brother cut into his $400 steak. His wife smirked. Be grateful you're even invited. I stayed silent. But when the waiter came with the bill, I stood up and said, send it to the ones who actually ordered. You know those moments where it feels like the whole world suddenly zooms out and you finally see things for what they are? For me, it all snapped into focus in the middle of a fancy steakhouse with a basket of bread and a table full of people who'd always told me I mattered but never once acted like it. Picture this. I'm sitting there, hands folded, waiting for someone to remember I exist. My dad, sitting at the head of the table, leans over and pushes a breadbasket toward me. He doesn't make eye contact, just says, completely flat, we didn't order for you. Not a hint of warmth, not a trace of embarrassment. My brother's already tucking into a steak that costs more than my electric bill, and my sister-in-law gives me this nasty little smirk, like I'm a stray dog they let come in from the rain. My mom? She looks down at her hands, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on her napkin. And honestly, I think to myself, this isn't even surprising. It's just another scene in the same movie I've been watching for years. Let me introduce myself before you get the wrong idea. I'm Michelle, 35, proud Midwesterner, and for the last 17 years, I've been my family's personal ATM. Birthday parties? I paid for the cakes. Roofing emergencies? I was the one cutting the check. Wedding deposits, car repairs, surprise bills, all handled by yours truly. You'd think I was their financial advisor, except nobody's asking for advice. They're just sending bills. Why'd I put up with it? Great question. I guess deep down, I believed that if I just kept showing up, kept giving, they'd finally see me. Not as an afterthought, not as a safety net, but as a daughter, a sister, a real person whose feelings mattered. Tonight, though, it finally hit me. That moment where my dad slid the bread in front of me and everyone else dug into their $1,000 feast like I was invisible. Everything I'd tried to ignore suddenly came crashing in. The years of being the one who gives without being seen, hoping that maybe just one day I'd belong for real. And you know what? That was the moment I knew things had to change. That you can't buy love, respect, or belonging, not from people who only see you as a solution, not a family member. So buckle up, because I'm about to tell you how 17 years of silent loyalty turned into one unforgettable night. A night when I finally stopped paying for the privilege of sitting at the table and started standing up, even if it meant standing alone. And if you're someone who's ever felt invisible in your own family or wondered if you're the only one who's quietly keeping everything afloat, stick around, because this story is for you. On paper, you'd never think I was anyone's safety net. My job sounds impressive. Territory manager in pharmaceutical sales, Midwest region. The pay is great, 95 grand base, sometimes hitting 140 after bonuses. And plenty of people think that means my life is nothing but airport lounges and designer handbags. But here's what they don't know. I drive a paid-off Honda. I live in a little two-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture from estate sales and Craigslist. My coworkers say I'm cheap. My family acts like I'm too broke to buy real groceries, which works for me, honestly. The less anyone notices, the less they ask. Because the truth is, I spend most of my time and money keeping everyone else's world spinning quietly, without fuss, and without ever asking for anything back. Let's talk about my brother Colby, family golden boy. You know the type. Every story makes him a genius. Every mistake is just learning. He tells everyone he owns a digital marketing agency in Minneapolis. Looks fancy on social media. A downtown office, leased Audi, wrist heavy with some shiny imported watch. But if you look closer, it's basically him and two random freelancers churning out generic Instagram posts for gyms and coffee shops. He charges small businesses way too much for basic stuff and acts like he's Zuckerberg. Then there's his wife, Chloe, social media influencer, or at least that's the story. She's got a bot-padded 8,000 Instagram followers and a full-time job posting latte art and manifesting abundance. She wears $400 shoes to brunch. Doesn't work. My mom treats her like she's Princess Diana. They bought a brownstone, heated floors, chef's kitchen, candles that cost more than my week's groceries. Their mortgage? over $3,200 a month, and I know because I've covered it twice. Funny thing is, for all their posting about living your best life, there's always one missed payment from disaster. But why worry with me in the background? When Colby's business goes through a cash flow hiccup, guess who gets the late night phone call? It goes further than their house. My parents, let's just say they've perfected the art of acting like everything's fine in public while quietly relying on me to fill the gaps. When their roof started leaking, I sent a check for $6,500. When Colby needed a wedding venue deposit and came up short, I wired $12,000. Accident takes out Chloe's car. I pick up the $2,800 insurance gap so she's not, God forbid, riding Uber Black instead of Range Rover. It'd be one thing if anyone ever said thank you, but they don't. In fact, they act like it's just what family does. My dad shakes hands at church and soaks up all the praise, telling everyone how he takes care of his kids. Colby posts number blessed selfies with captions about hustle and grind, standing in front of a Jeep I helped him buy. Chloe tags my mom in stories about lavish gifts like she personally paid for them, while I sit at home eating leftovers and watching my Venmo notifications light up at 2 a.m. My role never changes. The accountant, the backup plan, the fixer. People outside the family have no idea. My friend Evan tells me over and over I'm being used. He says I'm a doormat. But when you're tangled up in years of obligation and fear of being left out, it starts to feel normal. I tell myself it's easier to just pay and keep the peace because every time I've pushed back, the guilt trip is immediate. I started learning this role young, but it really solidified as we all got older. Every time something went wrong in my family, the expectation was clear. Michelle can handle it. Michelle always does. So here I am, a grown woman with a good job, a decent life, and a bottomless pit of quiet resentment. On the outside, everyone's thriving. Behind the scenes, I'm the one making sure none of their perfect facades crumble. And nobody, not one of them, even thinks to ask how I'm doing. You'd think, with all that giving, I was born generous and easygoing. Truth is, that role was assigned to me a long time ago. I remember being 11, sitting alone at home because my younger brother got this birthday party at a trampoline park rented out, costumes, custom cake, the whole thing. I asked Mom if my best friend could come. She didn't even look at me before saying, Michelle, today isn't about you. Don't be selfish. That word hit me hard. I stayed home. Dad handed me $15 for pizza and went back to the party. No one noticed I wasn't there. That day, I figured out where I fit. If it's a spotlight moment, it's for Colby. If something needs covering, it's my job to solve it quietly. From then on, I learned not to ask for anything extra. The silence became routine. It wasn't just birthdays. My college fund disappeared overnight when Colby wanted to go to some fancy private school with a lacrosse team. Graduation party? Canceled. Why? Colby had a playoff game that day. I shrugged it off. But each time, it chipped away at the idea that I mattered as much. I bought my first used car after working endless warehouse shifts, felt proud until Dad got angry. He said people would think he couldn't provide and that I'd embarrass them. 3 months later, he surprised Colby with a Jeep and made sure every church friend heard about it. That's how it always was. I was never the one to celebrate, always the one expected to understand. If someone needed extra cash because bills piled up, I'd quietly wire it from my savings. Medical emergencies and roof repairs, my checkbook handled it. No one ever checked on me or asked if I was okay. If I hesitated, the guilt trip started, family comes first, or be grateful we included you. Over the years, I learned to shrink myself, to sit back, watch others get the praise, handle the details, and just be happy for them. Colby's accomplishments were the centerpiece of every gathering, his business updates the highlight of every meal. Chloe got applause for Instagram milestones, while I barely got a nod for showing up. It's not that I wanted the spotlight. I wanted the basic stuff, a sense of belonging, maybe a thank you, or even just being asked about my own life now and then. But every family phone call, text thread, and dinner invitation said the same thing. Michelle's job is to help. My friend Evan saw all this before I did. We'd meet for lunch, and he'd listen to my stories. shaking his head at the latest favor or emergency. He'd ask, "Why do you always say yes?" I'd change the subject because it was easier. Even then, a part of me hoped that my generosity would change how my family saw me, that one day maybe being the helper would turn into being a loved daughter and sister. Instead, it became a cycle. I'd give, get ignored, feel sad, and try again, always convinced that maybe one more favor would finally win their love. Looking back, I realized how unfair it was, but at the time I just wanted to belong. That was my earliest lesson, and it stuck even as everything else kept changing. Time passed, and that blueprint of giving and ignoring became my normal. I finished college, started working, and jumped into adulthood carrying those habits I learned as a kid. Whenever my phone buzzed with a family emergency, my reflex was to help. House repairs, car accidents, medical bills, wedding deposits, I was always first to respond. Sometimes I'd scramble to cover the bill, then cut corners in my own life, but that part never seemed to matter. The pattern was simple. If anything went wrong, I'd get a phone call, sometimes in the middle of the night. The voice on the other end was always stressed, sometimes angry, but always certain that I was the solution. I'd send money and get nothing back except guilt if I hesitated. "This is what families do," Dad insisted. "You're lucky you can help," Mom said. Colby tossed out lines about hard work and resilience while tagging me in social posts, showing off the things I'd paid for. It got to the point where I couldn't remember the last time anyone asked about my own needs. Birthdays came and went with one-line texts. Holidays were about everyone else's updates and accomplishments. I became reliable but also invisible. Privately, I'd vent to Evan. I'd list each new thing I'd paid for and joke about being the family accountant. He'd roll his eyes and remind me, "They're never going to stop as long as you keep paying." He was right, but saying no felt impossible. Every time I tried, the wave of guilt and pushback was harsher than the cost of cutting back. I'd think, maybe if I just helped with this one problem, maybe next time it'll be different. Instead, the cycle repeated. I watched my family buy houses, take vacations, and celebrate successes built partly on my silent support. My own life felt small in comparison, even when I had every reason to be proud. The disconnect bothered me, but I told myself that it was just growing pains, that all the giving would eventually translate into love, appreciation, and validation. But the truth is, I was stuck, caught between the hope that my sacrifices would pay off and the reality that my family saw those sacrifices as their right, not a gift, not a reason to care or say thank you. Every new emergency was just another line item in an endless ledger, one they never even bothered to look at. By the time the dinner invitation came, my role felt set in stone. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the problem solver. And when my mom said the dinner was important, I knew without asking that somehow I'd end up paying even if I wasn't supposed to be the guest of honor. 4 months ago, on a Thursday afternoon, my mom called me while I was wrapping up some work with a hospital administrator. Her voice had that fake cheerful edge I knew too well. She said, "Your dad wants to take the whole family out to dinner this Saturday night. It's important." Right away, I knew what that meant. Colby and Chloe had news to share, and based on history, it was probably a brag. I already knew how it would play out. I'd be expected to pay, ignored until the last minute, then hit with guilt if I declined. Part of me wanted to say no and spare myself, but I also knew what happened when I refused. My mom would send paragraph-long texts about putting family first. Dad would leave voicemails calling me ungrateful. Colby would post something passive-aggressive online about how hard it is when loved ones don't support your success. As usual, it was easier to just go along. I said yes, masking every ounce of dread. After we hung up, I Googled the restaurant, Monarch Prime. It was the kind of place business executives use to close million-dollar deals, not the sort you swing by for a family night. No menu online, but the reviews made it clear the cheapest steaks were already outrageous, and the top options started at $200. It wasn't lost on me that this dinner would cost someone a fortune. I already sensed who it would be. That night, I called Evan and told him about the dinner. He just laughed. the kind of laugh you use when someone's making the same mistake again. How much do you think this'll cost you? He said. A couple grand, probably, I replied, half joking, half resigned. They're never going to stop as long as you keep paying, Evan reminded me. But I still didn't truly believe it, at least, not yet. Saturday came. I tried to keep my morning normal, went to the gym, ate a cheap meal at my favorite Vietnamese spot, caught up on emails, and watched some college football. Around 6:45, I got dressed, put on my least flashy outfit, and drove to Monarch Prime. The place was every bit as upscale as I expected: converted warehouse, exposed brick, endless windows, valet parking. The hostess greeted me by my dad's name and led me to a fancy corner table overlooking the city. I was the first to arrive. Sitting alone, I ordered water and didn't touch the bread. My family arrived late, all dressed up to the nines, completely ignoring that I was already there. My mom wore a new dress, dad a full suit. Colby and Chloe stepped straight out of a catalog. Nobody even greeted me. They dumped their coats and bags, exchanged waves with distant acquaintances, and dove straight into conversations about investments, baby names, and social media followers. The tension wasn't just in my head. As drinks and menus appeared, everyone ordered like royalty except for me. I stared at the prices and figured I'd grab the pasta, the cheapest thing on the menu. Before I could say a word, my dad interrupted. Michelle doesn't need much. She's trying to save money. He reached over, slid the bread basket toward me, loud enough for everyone to notice. That moment, that scrape of the basket across the tablecloth, was pure humiliation. Chloe gave me that same little smirk. You should be grateful your dad even invited you. That was the message. My role was clear. The entire table went silent except for my dad, who changed the subject like nothing happened. And all I could do was chew tasteless bread and pretend it didn't matter. I remember sitting there as my family turned their attention to the waiter, ordering the most outrageous menu items with zero restraint. Lobster, porterhouse steaks, truffle butter, caviar, everything designed to impress. The waiter moved smoothly, taking their orders, pouring drinks, setting down plates piled high with food. My only contribution was the bread basket, now half empty. Nobody made any effort to include me. As the courses rolled out, each plate was more decadent than the last. Colby and Chloe tore into the lobster, commenting on how good it was. My mom snapped pictures for social media. My dad offered unsolicited investment advice as if he were the patriarch of some dynasty. All the while, my stomach churned not from hunger, but from the sense of being invisible right there in front of them. Then came the main course: steaks the size of roasts, lobster tails glistening, sides of creamed spinach and fancy vegetables. Every spot at the table had a meal except for me. I stared at the bread that tasted like nothing. Nobody offered a bite. Nobody asked how I was doing. I tried to focus on my thoughts, running through the history of every time I'd paid for something big. Roof repairs, wedding deposits, car accidents, medical bills. It added up in my mind. Each bite they took a reminder of the thousands I'd spent only to be treated as an outsider. Kobe looked over, smirked, and said, You know, Michelle, if you actually applied yourself, you could afford to eat like an adult. Chloe immediately laughed, genuine, heartless laughter that echoed around the table. My mom smiled quietly. My dad never looked up. This wasn't the first time I'd been the butt of a family joke, but something about the scene felt different. Dessert arrived, a massive chocolate creation, ornate and excessive. 4 spoons, none for me. They devoured it quickly, complimented the chef, and reveled in their good fortune. My dad patted his stomach and declared the meal perfect, already planning the next one. That's when the waiter returned, black folder in hand, and out of habit gave it to me. That was always the deal. Michelle pays, everyone else enjoys. I opened it, saw the number $3,184, nearly 10% of my take-home salary, for a meal I was never part of. Without thinking, I stood up, the chair scraping the floor so loud that people at other tables stared. I closed the folder, pushed it to my father, looked straight at the waiter and said, Give it to the people who actually ate. Silence. Complete, unflinching silence. My mom gasped. Dad's eyes went red. Colby's bravado faded. Chloe looked genuinely offended, like her show was being ruined. The waiter paused, realizing this wasn't the joke. I turned, left the table without looking back, walked through the dimly lit restaurant, past the bar, past the host stand, and out the front door into the cold October air. My hands shook as I realized I'd finally done it. I'd stood up to them after nearly 2 decades. In my car, I let myself breathe for the first time in years. Texts started pouring in, frantic and angry. Mom demanding I return, Dad calling me disrespectful, Colby saying I was embarrassing everyone, Chloe telling me to grow up and pay. I blocked them all, a click for each, feeling a little lighter with every step. Driving home, the city looked completely different. I took the long way, past familiar neighborhoods, finally free of the weight that had held me down so long. Stepping into my apartment, I realized for 17 years I'd confused keeping the peace with letting myself be treated like a stranger. Now, sitting in the quiet, I felt a kind of calm I'd never known. That dinner was more than just humiliation or a bill. It was the final push that forced me to reclaim my worth and stop paying for a family that never saw me. The food was for them, but that moment, that choice, that was finally just for me. The moment I handed that bill back, telling the waiter to give it to the people who ate, something shifted inside me that I didn't expect. I wasn't shaking or crying. In fact, I felt calm, the kind of calm that you get when you finally let go of holding your breath too long. I knew things were about to get messy. Texts started flooding in almost immediately. My phone buzzed and buzzed as my family tried to reel me back in. Mom's first message was a long, pleading text. Come back, Michelle. This is family. You don't get to embarrass us like this. Dad left 2 voicemails, his voice thick with frustration and disbelief. Colby's texts were sharp, accusing me of ruining everything, calling me ungrateful. Chloe just told me to grow up and pay the bill like an adult. Normally, I might have felt guilt or panic, but this time I read every message and let them sit there, unread and unanswered. When the last one came through, I blocked them all, one by one, click, click, click. After that, I sat down and started going through my banking app. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking to send money, I was looking to take control. I found automatic payments I'd set up over the years. My dad's yacht club membership, $385 a month. Colby's business loan payments that I'd quietly covered, $850 a month. My mom's spa membership, the timeshare in Scottsdale my parents used for just a few weeks out of the year, but I'd paid for every single month. Every single payment I canceled, every contract I called to terminate, every credit card account I locked down. It was like breaking chains I hadn't even realized bound me. And then I went deeper. I searched receipts and invoices, finding all the trips, weddings, renovations, and expensive dinners I'd quietly paid for without a thank you or even a you're invited. I compiled a folder filled with evidence of the lifetime of transactions designed to keep me tethered to a family that never saw me. The final tally? $284,000. Almost 300 grand money I'd given over 17 years to people who treated me like a stranger, not a daughter. I sent an email to extended family explaining I needed space and wouldn't be responding to messages on behalf of my parents and brother. I set up filters so any incoming email mentioning their names would go straight into a folder I'd never check. Silence was what I needed to heal. It was the hardest but most freeing choice I've ever made. I felt alive for the first time in years, no longer drowning in guilt or obligation. The days that followed were surreal. My phone stayed quiet, except for a few filtered messages I never saw. My family tried everything, calls to my building manager, emails to my workplace, even messages to friends, all in an attempt to reach me. They showed up uninvited, demanding access, but I didn't respond. I stood firm. One afternoon, I was leaving my apartment when I saw them in the lobby. All 4 of them, Dad, Mom, Colby, and Chloe, standing near the front desk, talking to my building manager. My heart thudded, but I knew it was time to face them. I walked over, cold and steady. My building manager introduced them as my family, asking if they could come up. I looked at my so-called family and said, no, this was my home, not theirs. Mom stepped forward, pleading, Michelle, we just want to talk. But I shook my head. No. Dad looked red with anger. You embarrassed us. You owe us an explanation. I met his gaze without flinching. I don't owe you anything, I said. Colby snapped. Stop talking to Dad like that. You need to fix this. Grow up. I am grown up, I said. And I'm done with you all. Mom started crying. How can you do this? What happened to you? I shoved aside the pain and said what needed to be said. What happened to me? I'm done being the family wallet. I was never your daughter. I was just a source of money, and now that account is closed. They froze in shock. Dad tried to protest, but I cut him off. Why did you hand me a breadbasket while you all ate $400 steaks? I asked. Why did Chloe say I should be grateful to be invited? Why have I been paying your bills for years while you ignored me? The silence was deafening. Other tenants looked on, sensing the tension. I made it clear. I had canceled all payments, removed them from my credit cards, and disputed unauthorized charges. I was done. Dad shouted, You can't do this. You don't get to cut us off. I smiled and said, I just did. Sue me. Colby snarled, You're going to regret this. I replied calmly, I'm not. I turned to my building manager and asked him to escort them out. They left, and I never looked back. In that moment, I felt a mix of relief, sorrow, and fierce pride. I was finally free from expectations, free from guilt, free from people who couldn't see me for who I was. The day my family showed up at my apartment building was surreal. I was heading out for lunch when I spotted them in the lobby, Dad, Mom, Colby, and Chloe, standing close to the front desk, talking to my building manager. I felt a pit in my stomach, but this was my space, my home. I wasn't going to back down. I approached them calmly. Stan, my building manager, introduced them as my family, asking if they could come up. My answer was firm, no. They were intruders, not guests, and I made it clear they had no right to storm my sanctuary. Mom stepped forward, her eyes pleading, Michelle, please, we just want to talk. But I shook my head again. I wasn't interested. Dad's face flushed with anger. You embarrassed us. You owe us an explanation. Looking him straight in the eye, I answered honestly, I don't owe you anything. Colby moved closer, jaw tight. Don't you dare talk to your father like that. You need to grow up and fix this. My voice didn't waver. I am grown up, and I'm done with all of you. I saw tears in Mom's eyes as she whispered, How can you do this? What happened to you? I spoke with the strength I didn't know I had. What happened to me? I realized I was never your daughter or sister. I was just a wallet, and that account is closed. They were silent. Dad tried to speak again, but I cut him off. Why did they treat me like that? Why was I the only one paying for their lives when they ignored me? The room fell deathly quiet. Other residents sensing the tension as they hurried past. I let them know I'd canceled every last payment, removed them from my credit cards, and disputed fraudulent charges. I was done. Dad shouted one last time, You can't do this. You don't get to cut us off. I smiled, feeling final and free. I just did. Sue me. Colby spat. You're going to regret this. I responded calmly, I'm not. I asked Stan to escort them out. They left without another word, and I never looked back. That moment was bittersweet. I mourned what should have been, but I also felt a strength I'd never known, the power of saying no, standing my ground, and reclaiming my life. Sitting alone in my apartment after that confrontation, I felt a strange sense of peace. For years, I'd believed staying quiet was the same as keeping the peace, that paying their bills, hiding my pain, and silencing my voice was what family required. But now I saw the truth. I was never their daughter or sister. I was the family wallet, and I had finally closed the account. I pulled up every receipt, every bank statement, and every invoice I could find, building a detailed spreadsheet. 17 years of payments, $284,000. That was money that could have bought a house, started a retirement fund, or given me opportunities I never had. I broke down every expense, Weddings, renovations, medical bills, mortgages, vacations. It was exhausting but necessary. The financial depth of my sacrifice hit me like a gut punch. Why had I ignored it for so long? But the deeper truth was not about money. It was about self-worth and recognition. I realized I'd spent years invisible to my family, used and valued only for what I could provide. That hurt more than any bill could. And yet I feel freer than I have in years, because for the first time I stood up for myself. I took my power back. I chose me. Over the next days, I watched the fallout silently. Notices about canceled memberships, late loan payments, and revoked memberships arrived at their doors. I didn't gloat. I just felt relief knowing I was no longer responsible. This isn't the end of the story. Healing will take time. There's anger, sadness, and loss to process. But the most important part is that I'm no longer hiding, no longer silent, no longer invisible. I hope my story helps those who feel the weight of unseen sacrifice. You deserve more than to be the family wallet. You deserve respect, love, and a place at the table, not just the crumbs. So listen carefully, because sometimes saying no is the bravest thing you can do. And in that no, you might just find your freedom. If this story hit home or made you think about your own family, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your experiences or thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories from Reddit just like this one. Remember, you're never alone. And sometimes standing up for yourself is the strongest thing you can do. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.